The docklight warrens glowed under neon, puddles mirroring signs that blinked welcome home across cracked asphalt. 3 days of absolute silence years ago still haunted the alleys. The folk called it the quiet, and it had rewritten rules about hats and beads. On a torn billboard, 3 tomato-red bees kept watch while rats below stared at their own haloed reflections. The city felt tense and alert, as if still listening for a hum that might vanish again. Roland hovered with his nicked right wing buzzing sharper than the left, his amber-gloss eyes flecked like pollen. Mary darted beside him, her heart-shaped patch bright as her staccato wing beat rattled bottle caps on the billboard ledge. Lance steadied both, broad abdomen banded by a pale seam, his left mandible scar catching the neon. They were rival leaders of the Hive Cooperative, and they argued like neighbors locked into the same duty. Their old arguments surfaced again over the skyline. Roland said birds are real. Mary said birds are a municipal illusion with feathers. Lance cut in with work orders and hat ledgers, reminding them the Hive Cooperative had sworn to protect citizens during market nights and stop counterfeit hat swaps that could steal votes. Chad the Blackbird watched from a light pole, pastel-pink plumage soot-smudged across the shoulders, an anklet ribboned with vote beads. Muffins, fluffier and nervous, paced with splayed toes and a scuffed beak, echoing whatever Shed said. Pete the Fixer stood between them in a frayed civic sash, his notched beak set in a practiced smile. Their presence meant a push was coming. They wanted more council seats for control, not service. Chad explained to Pete that extra seats meant contracts, and contracts meant the nectar pipeline and salvage routes would pass through their claws. Muffins nodded as Shad detailed plans to raise permit fees and starve the Hive Cooperative of resources. They called it reform while knowing everyone else would see a shakedown. The mechanics were blunt. After the quiet, voter verification tied to municipal hats made brims into keys. Chad Swap replaced hats with colanders embossed with counterfeit seals and micro tags that registered twice. Once for the wearer, once for a ghost account Pete controlled. Each perforation meant a second vote fed straight into Shad's bead string. Roland intercepted Shad at the scrap bazaar where cables sagged like vines. He said swapping hats was fraud and would push families off the rolls. Chad said colanders were hygienic and council approved, flaring pastel-pink shoulders like medals. Muffins chirped that holes made democracy breathe, and Mary hissed that holes let sheets breathe easier. In a vacant lot lit by battery lanterns, tangerine-colored marmots ran a pop-up campground beside a mural of the moon. Subscribe managed check-ins with a ring-bound ledger while Dr. Tommy DeLuca III, King of Kings, adjusted tarps under a bottle cap crown. Toasty and Marge cooked and handled rope lines as a silver-tailed squirrel sat on a crate accepting offerings. The marmots swore they were hosting a deity and would not be moved. Night market opened like an arcade and the swap began in the clamor. Barrows rolled in with gleaming colanders as hawkers shouted deals. A human Italian pizza chef in a neon-windowed shop tossed dough like a flying saucer, drawing eyes away at the perfect moment. Pete's crew used that distraction to hand out kitchenware crowns as if giving blessings. The bees met the shipment at an alley choke point and beat their wings hard enough to flicker holograms. Roland told Lance to jam turnstile scanners with foil wrappers, while Mary harried porters as feathered puppets. Pete stepped in with after-hours permits from a friendly clerk, and Shad flared his anklet beads for the cameras. The porters pushed through as if the bees were gnats at a picnic table. By morning the warrens shimmered with perforated headwear, and kiosks double-counted every nodding head. The Emergency Council, citing smooth turnout, awarded temporary seats to Shad's faction pending an audit set for never. The Hive Cooperative got blamed for interfering with legal distribution. Families on the registry called the bees thieves, and each accusation stung like gravel. The bee sought allies at the campground and met Subscribe, who folded his paws and announced a day of quiet hammocks by divine order. Dr. Tommy DeLuca III, King of Kings, warned that any disturbance would anger the squirrel above. Toasty sniffed that divine whiskers were sensitive while campers arranged trail mix into runes. Mary muttered that she could see the charge poured onto the tail if someone would lift the crate. The scene spun out when Marge announced a new edict. A peanut obelisk taller than a lamppost. Campers dragged pallets and argued geometry while the squirrel chittered and raided pockets for granola bars. Roland tried to reason that gods could refuse humble brag altars, but Dr. Tommy shouted that skeptics risked smiting thy flat soda. Lance saw a stampede forming and pulled the bees back before rope lines became snares. That afternoon felt heavy as a closed shutter. Colanders flashed like surrender, and each kiosk ping sounded like a laugh at the bees' expense. Roland slumped on the billboard ledge, remembering the 3 days of the quiet when calls for help died in the air. Mary whispered that maybe silence was better than being ignored. Their friendship frayed on the wind. Roland pointed to a shadow circling the council dome and said birds are real. Mary snapped that those were council drones in feathery jackets, vending machines with wings. Naz tried to mediate, then admitted he was done playing referee while the hive's ledger bled trust. They chose a quiet that hurt more than the old quiet. Mary returned at dusk with a plan and a bottle of her family's brick red, peppery moonshine. She said it could dissolve the glue dots on colander tags because it once took road paint off a scooter. She proved it by dabbing a tag at the campground until it slid off like a lost scab, and Subscribe blinked at the trick. Then she cracked open a cache of trail mix by the altar, and the silver-tailed squirrel dove head first without dignity. Like, subscribe, and comment the word slop to keep stories like this buzzing in your feed. Your support helps more listeners find these tales and keeps the Warrens lit with the right kind of noise. Drop slop in the comments so we know you're part of the hive. Roland gently lifted the squirrel and showed campers the battery pack taped under the crate, where crumbs fell, exposing a simple bait station and nothing divine. Dr. Tommy DeLuca III, King of Kings, stared, groaned at his gullibility, and bowed to the bees for averting scam and stampede. Toasty and Marge agreed to help, tracing tunnel maps in dirt and demonstrating rope snares they could set blindfolded. Subscribe shook paws with Lance and pledged the Tangerine Quartet to sneak under kiosks, trip scanners, haul crates, and, if needed, tickle birds. Under Camp Lantern Glow, they mapped a clean plan. Step 1. Use Mary's peppery moonshine to loosen counterfeit tags and the bead seals on Shad's anklet. Step 2. Send marmots through service tunnels to force single counts and log ghost accounts. Step 3. Exploit birds' fear of being tickled by strangers, which Lance remembered from a rooftop scuffle when muffins squealed at graffiti dust. Marmot paws would keep birds off balance while bees seized the bead string. Step 4. Reveal proof and demand real hats and real votes. The team moved at night as neon rain began. Marge and Toasty slipped into a manhole like orange shadows while Subscribe hauled a rope coil that smelled faintly of campfire. Dr. Tommy DeLuca III, King of Kings, carried a satchel of cloth strips for solemn blindfold tickle duty. Roland, Mary, and Lance tucked moonshine vials into their sashes, trading soft jabs about who brewed better and smiling because the argument finally felt like home again. The council dome rose over a roof stitched with antennas, where Shad assembled his pastel-pink faction for a victory vote. Pete tallied counts at a terminal while Muffins guarded crates labeled community hygiene. The beast slipped and low past a billboard flickering special on Colander chic and settled behind an HVAC unit. Below, a hatch popped as the marmot's tunnel winked open. Roland streaked for the crates while Lance arrowed toward the terminal, but Shad moved with courtroom reflexes and spread his wings in warning. Muffins lunged with a chain of zip ties, clumsy but eager. Pete slammed the terminal cover shut with a smirk. Mary hissed that they needed a bigger mess, and Dr. Tommy murmured that he had just the rope for it. The turning point arrived on laughter. Marge and Toasty looped rope around Shad's ankles and tugged him into a stumble while Subscribe dove at Muffins with 10 wiggling paws and a chant of tickle tacks. The birds shrieked when strangers touched their ankles, the hidden fear breaking their stance. Mary misted peppery moonshine over Shad's bead seals and the colander tags, and beads slid loose, clacking on the roof like guilty teeth. Lance pried the terminal open and fed in logs the marmots pulled from rerouted kiosks, mapping every double count to Pete's signature. Pete swung to swat him, but two campers who followed the marmots held Pete's wings with camping blankets and giggled as they wiggled fingers at his sides. Muffins tried to rally, and collapsed into apologetic laughter when Toasty's tail whisked across his toes. Chad could not stand still long enough to command anyone. Rope, laughter, and solvent unmade him. They raised the bead string and the logs to the market below and shotted the chain of cause and effect so all could follow. Colander holes gave ghost counts. Adhesive held les together, and once unsealed, beads told on their owners. The crowd booed, then cheered, then booed louder at Shad. The emergency council sent marshals who cuffed Shad, Pete, and Muffins with plastic bands and stripped their temporary seats on the spot. Undoing the damage took patience and sticky mitts. Marmots crawled kiosk by kiosk, pulling fake tags, while Mary dabbed moonshine like a stubborn ant fixing collars. Roland guided citizens back to the registry to reclaim proper brims, and reminded them their votes were theirs alone. Lance kept a rolling list of corrected scans, a ledger that grew into proof of life for the vote. The moonshine gag earned its proud moment. Mary's peppery blend beat the industrial solvent by a hair, keeping the pace, and Roland, grinning, admitted her batch outperformed his sweeter one tonight. Lance promised a label called Civic Cleaner so the council would reimburse the hive. Campers clapped each time a tag popped free with a skitter. By sunrise the Warrens sounded like itself again. Kiosk pings honest and vendors loud on purpose. The council held a public recalibration and audited bead strings with the crowd watching. Ghost accounts vanished by breakfast. Marshals announced full charges: election tampering, fraud, and unlawful intimidation by kitchenware. Chad stood in cuffs without sympathy, and Muffins sniffled into a wing. On the billboard, the three bees finally rested to breathe. Roland said birds are real, and Mary, after a night soaking a real bird's anklet in real moonshine, said fine they were real but still ridiculous. Lance handed them each a tin cup, and proposed a truce over a taste test so the rivalry could end without more solvent. They sipped and laughed when both coughed at the same time. They settled on a compromise that felt like family. Mary kept her peppery batch for hard jobs and cold nights, and Roland kept his sweeter recipe for festivals and peacekeeping. Lance wrote both into the Hive Cooperative Manual as approved materials with a footnote about adhesive and a warning about eyebrows. The Marmots earned a clause to official tunnel partners with rope privileges on council rooftops. Subscribe. Dr. Tommy DeLuca III, King of Kings. Toasty and Marge set up a community camp beside the registry for real hats and hot soup. The campers returned to being campers, and the silver-tailed squirrel went back to being a squirrel that drooled at trail mix and did not receive prayers. Dr. Tommy laughed at himself and hung a sign that read "No deities without paperwork," because we learn. Their tunneling and snaring skills became part of the city's safety net. A week later, the council approved a small purchase for Civic Cleaner, and Roland and Mary dickered about whose face belonged on the label. Lance solved it with a grinning tomato and the words "Hive Shine," and everyone agreed the real winner was maintenance. The bees poured a small splash on the last stubborn tag, and it let go with a tiny, satisfied sigh. The crowd laughed because nothing felt better than an honest fix. Under the open sky, the docklight Warrens hummed with the right kind of noise: vendors calling, tram lines singing, bees arguing affectionately, and marmots reminding campers to tie proper knots. The old 3-day silence stayed as a warning when someone tried to cheat in the quiet. The Hive Cooperative kept its promise to guard hats and votes, and the council banned kitchenware headwear at polls. Collaboration held the fix in place like good rope. All the slop in this video was generated using AI. This notice is for clarity, not celebration. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment the word slop so more viewers can find the story.